Imagine, just for a second, living in a society where the simple act of learning to read is considered a literal sin. I want you to picture 19th century India. This was a time and place where education was explicitly, rigorously denied to women, and really to anyone from a marginalized caste. It was a world completely locked down by strict social hierarchies and orthodox traditions. But right in the middle of all this suppression, a revolutionary figure stepped up to break those chains. So who was modern India's first female teacher? Well, the answer to that question is the absolutely incredible Savitribai Phule. I am so thrilled to share her story with you in today's explainer, mostly because she isn't just some historical footnote. She is widely regarded as the mother of modern education in India. Alongside her husband, Jyotirao Phule, she took on this monumental task of advancing women's rights, fighting for universal education, and dismantling deeply ingrained caste discrimination. She was a poet, a pioneer, and an absolute trailblazer. Section 1. The status quo and the spark. Okay, let's dive right into this by exploring the world she was born into and the initial spark that ignited her entire life's mission. To really appreciate her journey, we have to look at her timeline. Savitribai was born in 1831 into a farming family in the Mali community in Maharashtra. And, like almost all girls of her era, she was entirely denied formal schooling. In fact, she was completely illiterate when she was married to Jyotirao Phule in 1840. She was just 9 years old and he was 13. But think about this. By 1848, she was opening the country's first modern girls' school. That is a remarkably rapid progression from an uneducated child bride to a pioneering educator in just a handful of years. So you might be wondering, how exactly did she bridge that massive gap? She was born into this grim 19th century reality of child marriage, harsh caste oppression, and a total ban on female education. Well, recognizing her intelligence, her husband Jyotirao provided the spark. He actually began teaching her to read and write at home while they worked on their farm. But she didn't stop there. She eventually enrolled in formal teacher training programs, including one run by an American missionary named Cynthia Farrar. And this formal training made Savitribai one of India's first professionally trained women teachers. Section 2. Breaking the educational barrier. She took that initial spark of learning and turned it into a roaring fire for an entire nation. Let's look at how she actually broke that barrier down. In January 1848, Savitribai, along with her husband and his aunt Suganabai, achieved something historically monumental. They established India's first girls' school at Bidewada in Pune. Savitribai became the school's very first headmistress. And what's super fascinating here is that they didn't just teach basic reading and writing. No, they implemented a highly progressive Western curriculum that included math, science, and social studies. They were giving these girls the exact same intellectual tools that were traditionally reserved exclusively for upper caste men. A real game changer. What's truly staggering is this number, 150. Despite massive societal opposition, their teaching methods were incredibly effective. By the end of 1851, Savitribai and Jyotirao were managing 3 different schools in Pune with about 150 girls enrolled. Because their teaching methods were considered so superior, the number of girls getting an education in their schools actually outnumbered the boys enrolled in the local government schools. Just amazing. Section 3. Stones, dung, and resistance. Because, as you can guess, threatening a centuries-old hierarchy of power comes with a very heavy price. And that brings us to the intense, visceral pushback she faced. I want you to imagine the sheer, raw bravery it takes to go to work under these conditions. Savitribai faced a daily barrage of physical and verbal assault. While simply walking to her school to teach, Orthodox fundamentalists would literally hurl stones, mud, and cow dung at her. The abuse was so consistent and so filthy that she famously had to carry an extra sari with her to work every single day. She would take the abuse on her walk, arrive at the school, quietly change into her clean sari, and just begin teaching her girls. And this brilliantly illustrates her mindset during that incredibly dark time. Instead of retreating, she fought back with her words. As an accomplished poet, she wrote these fiercely defiant lines: "Awake, arise, and educate. Smash traditions, liberate." Her poetry became this powerful tool to awaken self-respect among oppressed communities and to challenge Brahminical dominance directly. For her, education wasn't just learning, it was an act of absolute liberation. But the societal pushback didn't just stay on the streets, it invaded her home. The opposition from the conservative community got so severe that in 1849, Jyotirao's own father forced the couple out of their house. According to the orthodox texts of the time, the work they were doing, educating women and lower castes, was considered a literal sin. So they found themselves completely homeless, with zero money, simply because they believed women deserved the right to read.
However, this immense trial actually led to one of the most beautiful alliances in Indian history. After being kicked out, the Phules sought refuge with Jyotirao's friend, Usman Sheikh, and there Savitribai met Usman's sister, Fatima Sheikh. Fatima already knew how to read and write, and she took the teacher training course right alongside Savitribai. Fatima Sheikh went on to become India's first Muslim woman teacher. Together, these two women opened a brand new school in the Sheikh's home, forming a really powerful intersectional partnership against oppression.
Section 4. Champion of the Oppressed. Savitribai's crusade soon expanded way beyond the four walls of a classroom. She became a tireless champion fighting for overarching human dignity. Let's move to and see how this builds, because her activism scaled up incredibly fast. In 1852, she founded the Mahila Seva Mandal to raise awareness for women's rights. She hosted gatherings where women of all castes were required to sit on the exact same mat, which directly defied untouchability. Then, in 1863, the Phules opened the Bal Hatya Pratibandhak Griha, a care center for pregnant widows and victims of sexual violence, saving innocent lives from infanticide. And in 1873, they co-founded the Satya Shodak Samaj, or the Society of Truth Seekers, to fight against caste discrimination. Savitribai actually led the women's wing there. And she didn't just preach compassion, she lived it in her personal life. Savitribai and Jyotirao didn't have biological children, but they adopted a boy named Yashwantrao. Now, what is vital to understand here is that Yashwantrao was the son of a Brahmin widow. By adopting him, they practically bulldozed all the rigid social barriers and stigmas of their era regarding widows and caste purity. They even later arranged his marriage within their own organization, entirely bypassing traditional prejudices.
Section 5. Sacrifice and Lasting Legacy. As we reach the final chapter of Savitribai's life, we see that her dedication to the marginalized went all the way to the ultimate sacrifice.
Let's set the scene. It's 1897, and a grim, terrifying bubonic plague epidemic sweeps through Pune. It was part of the worldwide third pandemic. People were dying rapidly, and as is sadly often the case during major crises, the poorest and most marginalized communities were suffering the absolute most, largely ignored by society at large. Savitribai, who was now in her late 60s, didn't hesitate for a second. She and her adopted son Yashwant immediately opened a clinic on the outskirts of Pune to treat the infected. She personally transported the sick and distributed food. But perhaps her most heroic act happened when she learned that a young Goy from the marginalized Mahar settlement had contracted the plague. Savitribai rushed to him, physically picked up the infected boy, and carried him on her back to the hospital. Through this incredible act of selfless bravery, she contracted the plague herself. She passed away on March 10, 1897. She died exactly as she lived, on the front lines, fighting for the vulnerable. Ultimately, it all comes back to her core philosophy. Education is the true path to equality. Savitribai fundamentally believed that knowledge removes ignorance, and that learning is the ultimate, most practical tool to dismantle systemic oppression. She proved time and time again that real reform comes from practical work, opening schools, caring for widows, and challenging injustice through direct action rather than just empty words. Today, her global legacy is absolutely staggering. She is celebrated as the mother of modern education in India and a foundational pioneer of Dalit feminism. Institutions all across the country bear her name, including Pune University, which was officially renamed in her honor in 2015. Remarkably, a newly discovered species of flowering plant is slated to be named Jyotirao Phule in 2026 to honor her memory. And every single year on her birthday, January 3rd, Maharashtra celebrates Balika Din, Girl Child Day. It's a lasting, beautiful tribute to the little girls she fought so hard to put into classrooms. Savitribai Phule took the literal stones and mud thrown at her and used them to build the foundation of modern Indian education. She proved that a single spark of learning can burn down centuries of oppression. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. How are you using your own education to break chains today? Are you using the knowledge you have to uplift others, just as Savitribai did? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.